Some of the best-known ice cream brands in your freezer aisle are not legally allowed to call their products ice cream. Look closely at the carton and you'll find the words frozen dairy dessert, a phrase invented for products that don't contain enough real cream to meet the federal definition. And that's the polite scandal. In 2015, one of America's most beloved ice cream companies shipped products contaminated with listeria. People died. The company pleaded guilty to federal charges, and it paid more than $19 million in penalties. Meanwhile, up to half of what's inside a budget carton is literally air, and you're paying for it by volume. Tonight we're going through 12 ice cream brands and products you should not buy, and 4 that are actually real ice cream. Number 12. Number 12. Breyer's Frozen Dairy Desserts. Let's start with the switch that redefined this entire aisle, because Breyer's was the brand your grandparents trusted. For over a century, Breyer's built its name on a famous pledge of simplicity: real cream, real sugar, ingredients you could pronounce. Then, quietly, about a decade ago, shoppers started noticing something strange on cartons of familiar flavors. The words ice cream were gone. In their place, in small print, frozen dairy dessert. Here's why that matters. The FDA maintains a legal standard of identity for ice cream, a federal recipe, and the core requirement is at least 10% milk fat. That's the line. Cross below it, pump in more air and more additives, and you legally cannot print the words ice cream on the package. Frozen dairy dessert is not a marketing flourish. It's a confession. The phrase a product wears when it no longer qualifies for the name it built its reputation on. Breyer's reformulated a large share of its lineup into exactly that, swapping cream content for cheaper ingredients. Whey, corn syrup, gums, and the backlash was loud enough to make national business news. The company's defense was that customers preferred the smoother texture. Maybe some did. But nobody held a vote on whether a 100-year-old promise should be replaced with fine print. And to this day, millions of shoppers grab those cartons believing they're buying the ice cream their childhood remembers. Flip the carton. If it says frozen dairy dessert, the brand already told you the truth. It's just telling you quietly. And notice the design work protecting the secret. The phrase sits in the smallest legally acceptable type, tucked under the flavor name, on cartons whose fronts still show pouring cream and whole vanilla beans, imagery from the recipe the product no longer follows. The photography advertises the old promise. The fine print files the divorce. Both are on the same carton, and only one of them is legally binding. And once you learn to spot that phrase, you'll start seeing it everywhere. Because Breyer's wasn't alone. It was just the most famous name to make the trade. The next trick doesn't change the label at all. It changes what's inside the carton, invisibly. Number 11. The air you're paying for. Here's a number the ice cream industry never prints anywhere: overrun. That's the technical term for the amount of air whipped into ice cream during churning, and it's the quietest profit machine in the freezer aisle. Some air is necessary and good. It's what makes ice cream scoopable instead of a solid brick. Without any air, you'd have a frozen block of sweet cream you'd need a chisel for. Premium ice creams run low, overrun, maybe 20 or 30% air, a deliberate craft choice that makes every spoonful denser, colder, and slower to eat, which is why a premium pint satisfies at a half-cup serving while a budget tub invites a cereal bowl. But ice cream is sold by volume, not by weight, and budget brands discovered long ago that air is the one ingredient that costs absolutely nothing. Economy cartons can legally run overrun near 100%, which means roughly half of that big cheerful tub is empty space you paid cream prices for. There's a federal floor. Ice cream must weigh at least 4.5 pounds per gallon, but that floor sits low enough to permit an enormous amount of inflation. Want proof you can feel? Pick up a budget tub in one hand and a premium pint in the other. The tiny pint often weighs nearly as much as the big tub. That's not density magic. That's the big tub being half air. Weigh it another way. A half-cup serving of a dense premium ice cream can weigh over 100 grams, while the same half-cup of an economy brand might weigh 60. Same shelf, same word on the label, 40% less actual food. The airiest products also melt into thin foam rather than cream. Another tell your spoon already knows. Nothing about overrun is illegal, and that's the point of this segment. The most reliable trick in this aisle isn't an exotic chemical. It's selling you a container of whipped nothing and letting the picture of a cow do the talking. And speaking of what your spoon knows, the next entry is the reason some modern ice cream refuses to melt at all. Number 10. The Gum and Emulsifier Cocktail. A few years ago, videos went viral showing ice cream sandwiches and cheap cones sitting in the summer sun, barely melting, holding their shape like props. People called it fake, and the truth is more interesting. What they were seeing was the stabilizer system, the cocktail of gums and emulsifiers that holds modern budget ice cream together. Read a mainstream carton and you'll meet the cast: carrageenan, guar gum, cellulose gum, locust bean gum, mono and diglycerides, polysorbate 80. Each one is legal, each one approved, and together they perform a specific job, replacing the structure that cream and eggs used to provide. Gums fake the rich mouthfeel of butterfat. Emulsifiers keep the whipped-in air from escaping. Stabilizers stop ice crystals from forming when the carton half melts in your car and refreezes at home, which is why cheap ice cream survives abuse that would ruin the real thing. In other words, the additive stack exists so manufacturers can remove expensive cream and add free air without you noticing the difference on the first bite. You're not eating ice cream held together by cream. You're eating a foam held together by engineering. And you can run the experiment yourself tonight, for free. Put 1 scoop of a budget carton and 1 scoop of a 5-ingredient premium ice cream side by side on 2 plates on your counter, and set a timer for 30 minutes. The real one melts into what it was made from, a puddle of sweet cream. The engineered one slumps into a strange, foamy, shape-holding mound, because gums don't melt, they just relax. That plate is the entire ingredient list, performed live, and once you've watched it happen, you'll never need to read a label on those 2 brands again. Are these additives dangerous? For most people, at these doses, the honest answer is no, though carrageenan in particular has been debated for years over gut irritation findings in some studies, and several premium brands advertise removing it, which tells you the industry knows customers care. But danger was never the main point. The point is substitution. Every gum on that label is standing in a spot where cream used to be, and you're still paying as if the cream never left. Real ice cream has a short label for a reason: cream, milk, sugar, eggs, flavor. When the ingredient list reads like a lab requisition, the recipe is telling you what the marketing won't, and the next entry proves even the flavor itself gets the substitute treatment. Number 9. The vanilla that isn't. Vanilla is the best-selling ice cream flavor in America, and it's also where this aisle runs the oldest scam in the flavor business. Watch the wording on the carton, because federal labeling rules quietly sort vanilla ice cream into categories most shoppers have never heard of. If it just says vanilla, the flavor should come from real vanilla. If it says vanilla-flavored, artificial vanilla has entered the recipe. And if it hides behind natural and artificial flavors, you're mostly tasting vanillin, the synthetic molecule built in factories, historically from wood pulp byproducts, that we exposed in our vanilla extract video. The overwhelming majority of vanilla flavoring worldwide never touched a vanilla orchid, because the real crop is one of the most labor-intensive foods on Earth, hand-pollinated flower by flower in Madagascar, and there simply isn't enough of it for every carton claiming its name. Then there's the speck trick, those pretty black dots in vanilla bean varieties. Many manufacturers buy exhausted vanilla seeds, the spent leftovers after the flavor has already been extracted for other products, and stir them in purely as visual proof of beans that contributed almost nothing. The dots are set dressing. Premium brands using real extract and real bean paste do exist, and they tend to say so loudly and specifically, real vanilla extract, Madagascar vanilla, because they paid for it and want credit. Vague wording is never an accident in this business. When a $2 carton promises vanilla bean luxury, ask yourself what we asked in the vanilla episode. Who's paying for the world's second most expensive spice at that price? Nobody. The label just hopes you won't do the math. And if flavor games annoy you, the next entry plays games with your health goals instead. Number 8. Halo Top and the Diet Ice Cream Illusion. A few years ago, Halo Top conquered the freezer aisle with a seductive promise printed in giant numbers. An entire pint for around 300 calories. Protein ice cream. Guilt-free. The brand briefly became the best-selling pint in America, and an army of imitators followed. Enlightened, Arctic Zero, store-brand clones, all selling the same dream. Dessert without consequences. Here's what's actually in the carton. To delete the calories, these products delete the cream and sugar, then rebuild the missing body with sugar alcohols like erythritol, sweeteners like stevia and sucralose, extra protein powders, fiber syrups, and the full gum stack from our earlier segment. The result is legally and physically not ice cream in the traditional sense. Many are labeled light ice cream or frozen dairy dessert, and the texture confesses it. Icy, gummy, strangely cold-resistant, famous for needing to sit out for 15 minutes before it's even scoopable. The sugar alcohols bring their own fine print. In generous servings, they're notorious for digestive distress, which matters for a product explicitly marketed to be eaten by the pint. And the psychology is the deepest problem. Marketing an entire pint as a virtue trains the exact habit it claims to solve. Nutritionists have made this point repeatedly. A small serving of real ice cream, fully enjoyed, often serves people better than a whole pint of engineered substitute that never quite satisfies, because the satisfaction was the part they couldn't fake. Fat carries flavor, coats the tongue, and signals fullness, and when you strip it out, the brain keeps searching for the finish that never arrives, which is one reason the empty pint is this category's signature image. The brand sold you permission to finish it, and then the finishing became the proof you needed another pint. Diet ice cream isn't a scandal, it's a bargain, and you should see the whole bargain. Fewer calories in exchange for gums, sweeteners, sugar alcohols, and a pint-eating habit wearing a health halo. Sometimes the smartest dessert is a smaller portion of the real thing, which brings us to the scandal that wasn't a bargain at all, the one with a body count. Number 7. Blue Bell and the outbreak the industry wants forgotten. Blue Bell isn't just an ice cream brand in the South. It's practically a religion, the little creamery from Brenham, Texas, whose cartons say it tastes just like the good old days. Which is what made 2015 so devastating. That spring, health investigators linked a listeria outbreak to Blue Bell products. 10 people were hospitalized across 4 states. 3 patients in Kansas died. The company issued the first total recall in its century-long history, pulling every product off every shelf, and what investigators found made it worse. Evidence of listeria in production facilities going back years, with federal officials later saying the company knew about contamination problems and shipped product anyway. This wasn't a case of one bad batch slipping through. In 2020, Blue Bell pleaded guilty to federal misdemeanor charges of distributing adulterated products and agreed to pay $19.35 million in criminal penalties and civil settlements, one of the largest resolutions ever in a food safety case, and prosecutors separately pursued charges against the company's former president over the handling of the recall. Blue Bell cleaned house, upgraded facilities, and returned to shelves to enormous fanfare. Camping chairs outside grocery stores, news crews filming the first scoops, and plenty of loyal customers forgave instantly, which is their right. The comeback itself became a marketing triumph, which is worth pausing on, because it proves something uncomfortable about this industry. A food safety catastrophe, with a federal guilty plea attached, can be fully survived by a brand whose nostalgia is strong enough. The penalty was $19 million. The brand equity was worth far more, and everyone involved knew it. But this channel's job is memory, a brand whose entire identity is old-fashioned trust-shipped contaminated ice cream. People died, and the truth arrived through inspectors and prosecutors, not through the company's own announcements. Listeria is uniquely dangerous in ice cream precisely because freezing doesn't kill it, it waits. Every carton of nostalgia marketing in this aisle should be filtered through one question: what does this company do when nobody's looking? In Blue Bell's case, we know, because the Justice Department wrote it down. And the next entry shows the budget version of cutting corners, no outbreak required. Number 6. Store brand vanilla and the bottom shelf formula. Every supermarket has them. The giant budget tubs, great value, the neon-bright generic brands, the $5 buckets that feed birthday parties across America. We're not here to sneer at feeding a crowd cheaply. We're here to tell you exactly what the formula is, because the bottom shelf is where every trick in this video stacks together in one product. Maximum overrun. These are routinely the airiest products in the entire freezer, at or near the legal weight floor. Half the tub is air. Minimum dairy. Many are frozen dairy desserts rather than ice cream, built on whey, skim milk, corn syrup, and vegetable-derived fillers rather than cream. Full gum stack, because at this price point, the texture is entirely a stabilizer achievement. Artificial vanillin, because real vanilla is arithmetically impossible at $5 a bucket. And the final detail, these tubs are engineered for the one moment that sells them, the first spoonful. Sweet, soft, cold, a bulldozer of sugar that reads as delicious for exactly 3 seconds, which is all a product needs when it costs $5. Compare unit prices honestly, though, and the value story wobbles, because you're buying volume, and half the volume is air. Price the actual weight of actual food, and a mid-tier real ice cream on sale is often the better deal per gram of dairy than the bucket. Here's how to run that check in the aisle in 20 seconds. Ignore the shelf price entirely. Find the net weight in ounces on both cartons, that's printed by law, divide price by ounces, and compare. The bucket that looked like half the price frequently lands within pennies of the real ice cream, because you were comparing air to cream. Grocery stores print unit prices on the shelf tag for many products, but for ice cream the unit is usually per quart per volume, which conveniently hides exactly this trick. Weight is the honest unit. Volume is the marketing unit. The bottom shelf isn't evil. It's a math problem wearing a party hat, and the store is betting you'll never do the math. The next entry runs the same substitution at the fancy end of the aisle. Number 5. Gelato and frozen yogurt halos. Two more freezer neighbors deserve a hard look because both wear health and sophistication costumes over ordinary sugar. Start with frozen yogurt, the diet hero of the past few decades. The halo comes from the word yogurt, cultures, gut health, wholesome breakfast energy. The reality, most commercial froyo carries sugar loads equal to or higher than ice cream, because with less fat, sugar has to do more of the flavor work, and whether meaningful live cultures even survive the freezing and the sugary formula varies wildly by product. The self-serve froyo shops of the great frozen yogurt boom understood the psychology perfectly. Hand a customer a bucket-sized cup, surround them with candy toppings, and let the word yogurt absolve the whole transaction. A business model that quietly delivered some of the largest sugar servings in the entire dessert economy while wearing a gym membership's reputation. Dessert in a lab coat. Then gelato, which struts through the aisle on an Italian accent. Real Italian gelato is a genuine craft, lower fat than ice cream, less air, served warmer, intense flavor. Supermarket gelato in a plastic tub is frequently just another stabilized frozen dessert with an Italian flag font, sometimes airier and more syruped than the ice cream beside it, at a Euro-style markup. In both cases, the trick is identical. Borrow prestige, from health culture or from Italy, and charge for the borrowing. The fix is the same 10-second flip this channel always teaches. Ignore the accent, read the sugar line and the ingredient list, and compare it honestly against the ice cream you were steered away from. Half the time, the indulgent option you felt guilty about was the more honest food. Quick pause. If this deep dive is earning its minutes, hit like and subscribe, because we do this to a new aisle every single week, and the freezer section was overdue. All set? Because the next entry is aimed at the smallest people in your house. Number 4. Kids' novelties and the dye parade. The novelty freezer, character pops, rocket pops, birthday cake cones, bright blue everything, is the most engineered corner of the entire section, and it's aimed at people who are 4 years old. Look at what lights it up. Red 40, yellow 5, yellow 6, blue 1. The synthetic dye lineup that has spent years under scientific and regulatory scrutiny over behavioral effects in some children, scrutiny strong enough that European versions of many identical products carry warning labels or use natural colors instead, while the American versions stay neon. Whatever your personal read on the evidence, one fact is undeniable. The dyes serve zero purpose except making frozen sugar water more hypnotic to children. The industry knows how to make these products without them, because it already does. For Europe, same brand, same character on the wrapper, different formula in the box. A two-recipe system that exists purely because one market's regulators pushed and the others didn't. Then read the rest of a Character Pop's label. Corn syrup first, water, sugar, gums, artificial flavor, and in the chocolatey-coated bars, note that word, chocolatey. The legal wink meaning the coating is vegetable oil and cocoa powder rather than actual chocolate, chocolate's version of frozen dairy dessert. And the cartoon on the wrapper is doing exactly what it did on the cereal box and the gummy vitamin bottle in our earlier videos, bypassing the parent entirely to close the sale with the child. Nobody's saying kids can't have a popsicle. We're saying the specific products engineered hardest for children are ingredient for ingredient, the emptiest things in the freezer, and the engineering is the reason they don't have to be better. Buy the boring fruit bar with 3 ingredients. The cartoon isn't nutrition. And if your kids push back, run the swap gradually, because taste buds trained on neon syrup genuinely need a couple of weeks to recalibrate. The same 2-week reset we talked about in the creamer episode. The first plain fruit bar tastes like a downgrade. The 10th one tastes like fruit. That's not the child being difficult, that's the engineering wearing off, and watching it wear off is the most convincing food education a kid can get. The next entry is the word natural, doing its usual crimes. Number 3. All natural ice cream that isn't. By now, veterans of this channel can recite it with us. The word natural has no binding legal definition on most food packaging, and the freezer aisle exploits that vacuum as hard as any aisle in the store. Cartons stamped all natural sit there containing natural flavors, which can mean lab-assembled flavor compounds from natural starting materials, carrageenan and gums, natural in the sense that seaweed exists, and dairy from exactly the same industrial supply as the carton beside it. Some brands have faced class action lawsuits over natural claims on ice creams containing synthetic or processed ingredients, part of the broader wave of natural labeling litigation that has hit food companies for years, precisely because the word is legally squishy enough to invite it. Here's the tell that matters more than the word itself. A genuinely simple ice cream doesn't need to announce naturalness, it demonstrates it, with an ingredient list you can read aloud in one breath. Cream, milk, sugar, eggs, vanilla. The louder a carton shouts about being natural, farm imagery, hand-drawn fonts, meadow photography, the more carefully you should read the small print, because honest recipes brag with their ingredient list and vague recipes brag with adjectives. There's even a reliable pattern to where the word appears. Natural shows up biggest on exactly the products, with something to compensate for. The same inverse law we found with grass-fed on butter tubs full of canola and pure on honey that failed authenticity screening. In the supermarket, adjectives grow in inverse proportion to evidence. Natural is not a recipe. It's a font choice, and it costs the manufacturer nothing while adding $1 to the price, which, when you think about it, is the single best profit margin in this entire video, charging real money for a meaningless word. The next entry is a shrinking trick you've definitely fallen for, because everyone has. Number 2. The incredible shrinking carton. Pull out an old family photo from an ice cream night in the 90s and look at the carton, because it was bigger. And no, that's not nostalgia distorting your memory. The classic American half-gallon of ice cream, 2 full quarts, has been quietly shrinking for 2 decades. First, the industry cut it to 1.75 quarts. Then to 1.5. Same round tub shape, same shelf spot, same price or higher, 25% less ice cream, and the packaging designers earned their money making sure the smaller cartons look nearly identical at arm's length. It's called shrinkflation, and ice cream is one of its most documented victims, alongside the cereal boxes and paper towel rolls we've covered before. Combine it with everything else in this video and appreciate the full stack of the modern budget carton. A container that shrank by a quarter, filled with a product that's up to half air, made from a recipe that swapped cream for gums, flavored with vanillin instead of vanilla, wearing the words frozen dairy dessert that nobody reads. Every layer individually legal. All of them together, a masterclass in delivering less while charging more. One invisible notch at a time. Betting on the one thing this channel exists to fight. The fact that nobody looks closely at familiar things. Check the ounces printed on your carton tonight. That number is the only part of the packaging that isn't allowed to lie. And for the record, a few brands held the line and advertised it, kept the full size or printed the shrink openly, and shoppers rewarded them for it, which tells you the industry always had a choice. Shrinkflation isn't weather. It's a decision, made annually, in a meeting, by people betting you won't measure. Which brings us to number 1, and number 1 is bigger than any single brand. Number 1. Forgetting that ice cream has a legal definition. Here's the master key to the entire freezer aisle, the fact every trick in this video is hiding from. Ice cream is one of the few foods with a federal standard of identity, an actual legal recipe, at least 10% milk fat, real dairy, minimum weight per gallon. That standard exists because a century ago, manufacturers were already pulling these exact stunts, stretching cream with cheaper fats, whipping in air, selling imitation under trusted names, and the government drew a line around the word so the honest product could survive. The standards of identity were written as consumer protection in an era when adulteration was rampant, and they're the reason words like ice cream, butter, and vanilla extract still mean something specific when almost nothing else on the package does. Everything we've covered tonight is the industry's toolkit for living just outside that line while borrowing its trust. Frozen dairy dessert exists because the product fell below the milk fat line. Overrun inflation exists because the weight floor is the only limit on air. The gum stack exists to imitate the richness the missing cream used to provide. And all of it works for one reason only, because shoppers assume everything in the ice cream aisle is ice cream. It isn't. The aisle contains ice cream, and a growing crowd of products legally forbidden from using the name, shelved shoulder to shoulder with it, in near-identical cartons, at similar prices, betting everything on your peripheral vision. So here's the entire video in one habit. Find the product name on the carton, the small legal words, not the brand logo. If it says ice cream, the federal recipe backs it. If it says frozen dairy dessert, light ice cream, or frozen dessert, the carton is legally announcing that it's something else. 10 seconds, once per brand you buy. That's the whole defense. So what should actually be in your freezer? 4 real ones. First, Häagen-Dazs. Look past the invented Scandinavian name, it was born in the Bronx, and read the label, because it's the shortest famous label in the freezer. The classic vanilla runs 5 ingredients: cream, skim milk, sugar, egg yolks, vanilla. That's it. The entire label, no gums, no carrageenan, no frozen dairy anything, and the company has kept that formula essentially unchanged for decades, while competitors reformulated around it. It's genuine low overrun ice cream, dense enough that the pint weighs like a brick, made with real vanilla extract. And it's the product we used on the premium side of the melt test earlier, because it actually melts back into cream. Pick the pint up in the store and feel the weight against any budget tub. That heaviness is the entire lesson of this video sitting in your palm. It costs more per carton, and measured per gram of actual food instead of per liter of air, the gap versus the budget tubs shrinks dramatically. This is the mainstream benchmark for what the federal standard tastes like when a company aims above it. Second, Ben & Jerry's. The honest indulgence pick. Nobody is calling a Ben & Jerry's pint health food, least of all Ben & Jerry's, and that's exactly the point. It's real ice cream by the legal standard, an egg yolk custard base, heavy on cream, with chunks you can identify by name, and the company publishes its values and sourcing openly. Non-GMO ingredients, fair trade certified components, cage-free eggs. You're buying a lot of sugar, and you know it, which puts this pint miles ahead of every product in this video that delivers dessert while whispering health. Honest decadence beats dishonest virtue. Third, Alden's Organic. The certified pick. Organic dairy, no synthetic dyes, no high fructose corn syrup, real vanilla, in family-size cartons at prices that undercut the boutique organic pints. which is why it's quietly become the organic freezer staple in normal supermarkets. If the Bluebell segment left you thinking about supply chains, USDA Organic Certification adds a layer of auditing that conventional cartons never face, and Alden's is the most accessible way to get it in this aisle. And fourth, the 2-ingredient trick: make it yourself once. This is the format-as-proof pick, like grinding whole spices or DIY vanilla from our earlier videos. Whip cold heavy cream, fold in sweetened condensed milk, add real vanilla, freeze overnight. 2 core ingredients, no machine, and you will produce a dense, rich, genuinely real ice cream that embarrasses half this freezer aisle. Do it once, not because you'll do it forever, but because it permanently recalibrates your spoon. After you've tasted what cream, sugar, and cold actually make, no amount of gum engineering will fool your mouth again, and every carton in the store becomes easier to judge. So there it is, the freezer aisle on the record. A century-old brand that quietly stopped selling ice cream and hoped you'd keep reading the old label in your memory. Tubs that are half air, sold by the leader. A gum cocktail impersonating cream, vanillin impersonating vanilla, diet pints selling the habit they claim to cure, and one beloved creamery whose good old days included a federal guilty plea. Against all of it, one 10-second habit: read the product name, the real one, in the small print, then read the first 5 ingredients. Cream should be first. The list should end before you get bored, and the carton should be proud to say ice cream, because now you know that word is one of the few in the supermarket with a law behind it. Share this with the person in your house who did the grocery run this week. There's an excellent chance the carton in your freezer right now says frozen dairy dessert, and they've never once noticed. Then check our exposés on the bread, the butter, and the coffee creamer sitting nearby, because every one of them is running a version of the same game. New investigations every single week. This has been the Ice Cream File. Read the label, question the front, and don't let them sell you air.